Hey, this should be a pretty quick video on themes in the Odyssey. Um, Homer, when he wrote the Odyssey, clearly had some things on his mind that come out time and time again over the course of the story. So I just want to go through those in no particular order, I guess. Maybe the order of how the most prominent to the least prominent, maybe, I guess. So the first theme that we're going to look at in the Odyssey is an age-old theme. It's civilization versus nature. This is one of those themes that you run into in stories all the time, but it's much more prominent in stories that come from oral tradition and stories that go back to old cultures. This is because back in the old days, it was much more of a struggle to survive in the world than it is now. And so nature nowadays, we tend to think of nature as this great, glorious, perfect thing that is designed to be in a symbiotic relationship with us. We're supposed to be working together with nature, and somehow we've gotten out of balance with nature, and so nature is sort of the good guy, and civilization is sort of the bad guy, and we're to blame for destroying nature. That's a narrative that comes across in today's stories and today's societies. But back in ancient times, nature was an antagonist. Nature was evil, and it was destroying civilization. People were often barely hanging on. Now, in the Mediterranean, this is not quite as pronounced as if you were reading, say, an Anglo-Saxon epic written, in a northern climate where there are icebergs floating around, and it's much harder to grow a harvest and to survive and things like that. But it's still a very present and important theme in Greek mythology. You can see this in the story itself. Odysseus and his crew are on a ship and they're trying to get home across the ocean. The primary antagonist to Odysseus in the story is actually the god of the sea, Poseidon. And so, on some very fundamental level, this is a story about civilization symbolized by Odysseus, who is the king of Ithaca, and his crew, and their opposition to, or the way they're being opposed by, the ocean itself. And so it's a struggle of civilization against the ocean, something that's untamable, something that's unfathomably large and hard to understand. And so civilization versus nature underpins a lot of what's going on in the story. And you can look at the various monsters that Odysseus faces as representations of nature and this struggle. Both Odysseus learning to respect nature and realize that it's more powerful than himself slash civilization, but also to try and outthink the skill that Odysseus uses to overcome his struggles with nature is his mind, and that too represents civilization, the power of human beings to think and to outwit. So we'll track that as we go through and look at the ways that his the monsters that he faces, the dangers that he has to overcome represent nature. Um, Number two, the importance of family. Odysseus is on a quest to return home to his wife and son. His wife is named Penelope. His son is named Telemachus. And when he left, his son was a baby, just a tiny baby. In fact, there's a story about Odysseus leaving for the Trojan War. He didn't want to go. Yeah, he had made a promise. Like it goes back to Helen. Apparently, when Helen was trying to find a husband, there were all of these suitors, and one of the suitors for Helen was Odysseus. Before he met his wife Penelope, he was interested in marrying Helen, and she ended up deciding to marry Menelaus. But part of the story is that all of her suitors made a vow to come to Menelaus's aid if ever he needed it, because he won her hand and they were in love with her, and it was sort of a prophetic sort of thing because they all do have to come to his aid when she gets kidnapped by Paris. But Odysseus wanted to go back on this vow. He had a wife and kid of his own. He thought it would be dangerous to go to Troy, and he tried to avoid it entirely. And Menelaus knew how tricky and intelligent Odysseus was, so the guy he sent to bring Odysseus to war was also a tricky and intelligent guy. His name was Palamedes, and when Palamedes arrived to bring Odysseus to the Trojan War, Odysseus was pretending to be insane. He was acting crazy. He was putting salt on his fields, and he hitched up a donkey and an oxen to his plow at the same time, and they were going at different speeds. And he was plowing in a completely ludicrous way and doing all these things to convince Palamedes that he had lost his mind and thereby was, essentially 4F, was not fit to go to war. But Palamedes took his young baby son, his infant son Telemachus, and he put Odysseus' son Telemachus directly in front of the plow. And if Odysseus didn't turn the plow, he would have run over and killed his own son. And Odysseus turned the plow out of the way, thereby proving his sanity. And then he had to go off to war. And he left, and he was gone for 10 years of the Trojan War. And then he's going to take 10 years coming home because he's delayed by Poseidon and the various problems. And so 20 years go by. This baby who was an infant when he left is going to be a 20-year-old young man when he comes home. And his wife, Penelope, has never lost faith in Odysseus's ultimate return. She prays to the gods every day for his return. But the problem is that it's been 20 years, and so all of these suitors have entered the house. Suitors are people who want to marry her because she's the queen of Ithaca. If they marry her, whoever marries her gets to be king of Ithaca and have all of the properties and all of the wealth of Odysseus. And so they all assume he's dead. He's been MIA for 20 years. And so part of the importance of family theme is the struggle of Odysseus to get home and all that he's willing to go through to get home to his wife Penelope. Part of it is her devotion to him. She comes up with a stratagem. She comes up with a ruse to not have to marry any of these suitors. She says that she's making a funeral, I guess, pall or cloak or I don't know what you want to call blanket for Laertes, Odysseus' father. He's not dead yet, but she's planning it for his funeral. He's an old man. And she says when she's done making that, then she will marry. And she makes it every day on her loom, and every night she unwinds it so that she gets to keep working on it. And through the strategy, which kind of, I think, through this strategy, she ends up delaying the suitors for a good long time. But right before the Odyssey starts, the suitors have discovered what she's done and are now sort of forcing her to try and choose one of them and marry one of them. So she's doing her best not to marry somebody while she's married to Odysseus, thereby ensuring the sanctity of the family. Meanwhile, the son, Telemachus, is determined to go and find his father. And thereby reunite the family. And so all three of the family characters here are striving to reunite the family, and that's a key and important theme in the story. Next, we have the importance of hospitality. This gets stressed in sort of both legs of the story. The story is actually going to take two parts. There's the Ithaca part, and then there's the Odysseus off in the Mediterranean part. And so we're going to keep shifting between these two parts. And Odysseus is going to put himself in a lot of encounters where sometimes he's treated hospitably, yeah, there we go, by the people that he encounters, and sometimes he is not. And so the author is going to give you this contrast. We call it a juxtaposition in English. It's a fancy word for a compare and contrast between people who treat him well, like the Phaeacians, and people who treat him badly, like the Cyclops. And you're going to get this give and take between the two of them. And by watching how people treat a stranger, how people treat a guest, you as a reader, a Greek reader, theoretically thousands of years ago, start to learn the importance of hospitality and how to treat others. And that's how the thing works. Meanwhile, in the other side of the story, which takes place in Ithaca, Odysseus' homeland, and involves Penelope and Telemachus going off on a journey to find his father, we get a similar situation. We have these suitors who are all living in Odysseus' house, eating his food, treating everyone with disrespect, treating them badly, treating Penelope and Telemachus badly. They're taking advantage of Odysseus's hospitality and not giving any in return. And so you got these suitors who show sort of a negative aspect of hospitality. But then you have Telemachus, who's going to go off on his journey. And on his journey looking for his father, he's going to stay with Nestor in Pylos, and you're going to see positive hospitality. He's going to go to Sparta and visit Menelaus. You're going to see positive hospitality. And so you get again, the sort of give and take that shows you as a reader how to act and how to behave. So the importance of hospitality is definitely an important theme in the story. Next, we have respect the gods. Odysseus is in this problem because he didn't respect the gods, especially the god of the sea, as much as he should. And that's a difficulty. He's learning and he's growing, and he's able to gain respect for the gods as the story goes on. Telemachus is going to be involved with Athena and treat her with respect in very strong ways. It's not just respect the gods, also there's respect your elders. I think there's a number of sort of like little respect lessons within the story itself. But the suitors very clearly do not respect the gods. They are mistreating everybody around them, and they become an example of the dangers of arrogance and pride, which is a related theme. But Odysseus, his disrespect to Poseidon and his arrogance put him in trouble. And the suitors, their disrespect for Zeus and for the rules of hospitality put them in trouble. And so these two themes are interrelated, though they're also very easy to separate. Number 5 is the dangers of arrogance and pride, hubris, right? We talked about hubris, that overweening, enormous pride that the epic heroes, especially in ancient Greek literature, tend to have, which ultimately causes them difficulties and sometimes, like Achilles, results in the death or downfall of people they love. And so Odysseus is off on this long 10-year journey because he has been so arrogant that he's invoked the wrath of Poseidon. And, he's on a boat at sea. You don't piss off the god of the sea when you have a sea journey to make. And so Odysseus has to learn to overcome his pride and swallow his pride. You're going to see that very, very strongly towards the end of the story. I'm not going to reveal how or why, but watch Odysseus and his pride sort of change as the story goes on. The suitors, too, like I said, are disrespecting the gods, but they never change. They continue to be arrogant. We all know what happens to arrogant people, Icarus or Arachne or what have you, over the course of stories. Finally, and this theme really only applies to Telemachus himself, this is a coming-of-age story. Telemachus is becoming a man. He's transitioning from the role of a child to a Greek warrior, citizen, what have you. And so we have a sort of a passing of the torch story. We're going to, at the end of the story, see Laertes, Odysseus' father, the grandfather, the father and the son, all sort of united together in an interesting way. And it shows this progression. It connects back to the importance of family, but the coming of age story is something that is age old. And if you're reading your outside reading book, I think all of them are coming of age stories. Even though Bilbo Baggins is 50 when the story begins, he's still a child in a lot of ways, and he grows and changes and matures. And so when you watch that central figure, in this case Telemachus, go through the progression and begin to accept the responsibilities and make decisions that really matter in life and see and judge the outcome of those decisions and become his own person, that's what we call a coming of age story. And almost all young adult literature nowadays is coming of age stories. That's the big central, and this is one of those stories as well. So that's, I think, enough themes to go on. You can write this list down. They make good themes for your literary analysis paragraphs as you go to write those in the fourth quarter. But again, don't just use the theme as a buzzword. Don't be like, and this stresses the importance of the theme, the importance of family. I mean, okay, but really, one thing that I've been trying to teach you all year as you go through and you work on your writing is you have to phrase the theme as a lesson from the author to the reader. So instead of, when you go to write about this, saying the theme is the importance of family, what is Homer trying to teach the reader? And the way to say that would be something like, Homer is trying to teach the reader that when it all comes down to it, the most important thing that anybody can have in their life is family. It's more important than fame. It's more important than wealth. It's more important than your pride, right? And you want to get that sort of an idea across in your assertions rather than be like, the importance of family. All right, I'm going to shut up now, and hopefully this video is useful to you. Anyway, you have any questions, now's the time to ask. I'm more than happy to answer them. Thanks.